The sunlight streamed through the tall windows of my corner office, glinting off the sleek glass desk and the stack of neatly organized folders. I smoothed the silk of my blouse, feeling the familiar coolness against my skin, and glanced at the skyline outside. Everything looked perfect from here, my life, my career, my so-called independence. Yet, the quiet hum of the city couldn't drown out the familiar twist in my chest whenever I thought about home. My phone buzzed sharply against the polished wood, dragging me back. A text from Mom. "Your brother just got his car. Don't forget your rent this month." I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen, tasting the bitter irony. While he had keys to a shiny new car, I had a bill, my rent, my independence, my reality. The words were polite, almost innocuous, but they carried a weight that never seemed to lighten. I leaned back in my chair, the leather cool beneath me, and let my thoughts drift. Hurt, yes, but also a stubborn flicker of pride. They didn't see me, didn't believe in me, but I'd learned to navigate life quietly, invisibly, carving out my space without applause. I touched the edge of my desk, feeling the grain, grounding myself, reminding myself that this life, this small, deliberate control, was mine. I typed a quick reply. "Thanks for the reminder, I've got it covered." Then I set the phone down, letting the tension roll off like steam. One day they'd see. They just didn't know it yet. I was 17 when it all started to crack. The smell of burnt toast and cheap coffee still lingers in my memory, mixed with the sharp edge of my mother's voice. "You'll never amount to anything," she snapped, tossing a crumpled envelope at me. I caught it instinctively, my rent bill, the proof that, in their eyes, I was a burden. Across the kitchen, my brother grinned, keys to a brand new car dangling from his hand like a trophy. It wasn't just unfair, it was a verdict. My hands shook as I slid into the chair, trying not to let tears betray me. "It's just money," Dad muttered, not even meeting my eyes. "She's exaggerating." But I wasn't exaggerating. I was 14, 15, 16, scraping for anything I could do to help, and somehow that counted for nothing. The lump in my throat refused to disappear, and the sting of being dismissed cut deeper than any harsh word.
"It was Grandma who saved me that day."
She shuffled in, smelling faintly of lavender and worn leather, and placed a small, folded note beside my plate. "You are enough, even when they cannot see it. Use this, but don't let it define you." Inside was a modest sum she had saved from her knitting sales over the years. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Her eyes met mine, soft but unwavering. "You have a choice, sweetheart. You can stay here and be overlooked, or you can leave and build something that is yours. Something they cannot take from you." I stared at the note, then at my reflection in the window. A scared, small girl with trembling fingers and a tight knot in her chest. And in that instant I made a decision. I would leave. Not in anger, not in rebellion, but in quiet determination. I would carve out a life where I was valued on my own terms, not theirs. That night, I packed a small bag, slid the note from Grandma into my wallet, and left without a word. The empty hallway behind me echoed with the weight of unspoken goodbyes, but I didn't turn back. I had a future to claim. The first few months were brutal. I rented a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat, the hum of washing machines my nightly lullaby. My fingers ached from typing resumes, filling out applications, sending cover letters into the void. But Grandma's note stayed in my wallet, a talisman reminding me that my worth wasn't defined by their approval. I clung to it on nights when the electricity bill bounced and my stomach rumbled from instant noodles, when rejection emails arrived faster than I could read them. It was in one of those desperate afternoons that I met Evelyn Hart, a senior designer at a boutique marketing firm. I had submitted my portfolio online, never expecting a reply. But Evelyn called me, her voice calm, assured, the kind that made you feel like someone finally believed in your potential. "I don't care what they've told you, or what you think you're capable of," she said. "I see talent and I want to help you grow it." Under her guidance, I learned more than I had in years of formal education. Long nights became our ritual, sketching ideas under the flicker of desk lamps, caffeine-fueled brainstorming, quiet critiques that left me raw but wiser. I struggled, yes, There were moments I wanted to quit, moments when doubt crept in like a shadow, but each small victory lit a spark that wouldn't die. My first client came after 6 months, a modest contract, but it was mine, my name on the work, my signature on the invoice. I kept my progress hidden from family. My social media posts were vague, small glimpses of life, nothing that revealed the full picture. I wanted them to see me as insignificant, just as they had always assumed, because the truth, when revealed, would be far more powerful than their judgment. With each success, I grew bolder. I rented a proper studio, invested in quality materials, built a brand that slowly gained attention. I learned to negotiate, to stand firm, to trust my instincts. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing I was building something for me, without their interference, was intoxicating. By the second year, I was thriving. I had loyal clients, a modest team of freelancers who respected me, and a growing reputation in the design world. But still, no calls home. No attempts to gloat or rub my success in anyone's face. My triumph was mine, private and deliberate, like a carefully tended flame. And every night, when I put Grandma's note back in my wallet, I felt a surge of gratitude and of power. That small gift had ignited a journey that no one could take away, no one could define, and no one could ignore forever. One day, I told myself they would see. But I would decide the moment, the terms, and the truth would be mine to reveal. I hadn't expected them to come, not like this. But when the call came, my mother, insisting she needed to see how I was doing, I knew it had arrived. The moment I had been quietly preparing for, without anyone knowing. I chose the location carefully. My studio, now transformed into a sleek, airy office with walls lined in art I had created and curated, a reflection of years of toil and vision. Every object, every brushstroke, spoke of the life I had built, on my own terms. When they arrived, the familiar creak of the front door brought a flash of memory, and then I greeted them with calm, controlled warmth. My mother's eyes flicked around, sharp and searching, immediately catching the expensive lighting fixtures, the elegant furniture, the subtle scent of eucalyptus and polished wood. My brother, still clutching his keys, looked around in confusion, as though the place wasn't real, as though I had conjured it overnight. "Wow," he finally said, voice tight and certain. I didn't expect. I didn't answer right away. I let them absorb the space, the quiet authority it radiated. Every detail was deliberate. The gold-framed certificate of my first major client on the wall, a sleek laptop open to my current projects, a corner dedicated to my small but growing gallery of freelance talent I mentored. Their disbelief was palpable. They had expected a struggling girl, someone still paying rent, barely getting by. Instead, they found a woman in control of her destiny, a life curated with patience, skill, and relentless ambition. Finally, I spoke, my voice soft but unwavering. "I suppose it's time you saw the truth." I walked them through the timeline of my success, showing them contracts, my growing portfolio, the modest empire I had built without their help. I could see it registering, piece by piece, the shock settling over them like a heavy curtain. My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no words came. My brother's hands fidgeted with the keys he had once flaunted, suddenly meaningless in comparison. "I don't need your validation," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "I never did. But I wanted you to see that everything I have, I earned. Everything I am, I built. Without favors, without handouts, without expectation that anyone else would believe in me. Except Grandma." I lifted the small frame of her note I had kept on my desk all these years. She gave me the courage to leave.
To create. To rise.
And I did. Their faces betrayed every emotion, disbelief, guilt, shame, amazement, all tangled together. I let them stew in it, allowing them to confront their own assumptions, their own neglect. I could see my mother's eyes glisten, my brother's jaw tighten. But I did not gloat. I did not need to. The power of the reveal was not in humiliation, but in truth. For the first time, they realized that the girl they had dismissed, the one they thought would always be less than, had quietly rewritten the story. And now, standing there, composed, commanding, and undeniably successful, I understood fully. The moment was mine. They were finally seeing me, not as their child to be compared or dismissed, but as a woman who had claimed her life, her dignity, and her worth. I studied them quietly, letting the weight of the space settle around us. They had expected confrontation, tears, excuses, but this was not about revenge. This was about control, about clarity, about finally setting the terms for how our relationships would move forward. I could see their unease, the flicker of understanding that, for once, the dynamic had shifted. "I'm willing to help," I began, my voice calm, deliberate. "But not on your terms. On mine. If you want to be part of my life going forward, there are conditions. Simple, but non-negotiable." My mother's shoulders stiffened. My brother's eyes widened, as though bracing for some impossible demand. "First," I said, "acknowledge past mistakes. Not for me, but for yourselves. Pretending they didn't happen only lets them fester. Reflect honestly on how you treated me and commit to change." I watched their faces. Mom's jaw tightened. My brother's fingers drummed nervously on the edge of the desk. "Second," I continued, "stop comparing, stop belittling, stop assuming that success can only be measured by your standards. Each of us has a path, and mine was built without handouts. Respect that path, even if it's different from yours." My tone was firm, but not harsh. I wanted them to hear me, not fear me. "Third," I said, holding up Grandma's note, "remember that guidance, support, and encouragement are gifts. Use them wisely. Offer help without strings, without judgment. Learn to lift others rather than tear them down." I could see my mother swallow, a soft sigh escaping her lips as realization settled in. "Finally," I said, "pursue your own growth. Stop waiting for permission, for validation, for accolades handed to you. Dream, work, create. You've had chances to see me fail or struggle. I chose growth. You can too if you are willing." I let my words hang, the room thick with their contemplation. They shifted, nodded subtly, and I knew the truth was sinking in. The power wasn't in wealth or success or confrontation. It was in defining boundaries, in choosing who gets access to your life and on what terms. For the first time, they were listening, really listening. Not to criticize, not to judge, not to control, but to understand. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. The shift wasn't just for them. It was for me. For my peace, my dignity, my self-respect. I wasn't punishing them. I was creating a space where relationships could exist without fear, resentment, or old patterns dictating my life. When the room fell quiet, I smiled softly, a mixture of compassion and firmness in my eyes. "I love you," I said. "But I will no longer accept anything less than respect, honesty, and growth. If you're willing, we move forward. If not, then we honor the distance." And just like that, the power had shifted. It wasn't bitterness or revenge that defined the moment. It was clarity, strength, and a hard-earned peace that only comes from standing firmly in your own worth. Weeks passed, and change quietly unfolded. My mother started calling, not to remind me of bills or poke at my choices, but to genuinely ask for advice. My brother sent a tentative text about his own work, hinting at ambitions beyond material toys and accolades. Small gestures, yes, but they carried the weight of transformation. They were learning, and in turn, I felt a rare, unexpected warmth, the possibility of relationships rebuilt on honesty rather than expectation. I walked through my studio one evening, the soft glow of the desk lamp catching the brushstrokes on the wall. Everything felt complete, not because the space was luxurious or because clients admired my work, but because it reflected who I had become. Every piece of art, every carefully chosen book, every note from Grandma tucked into my wallet reminded me of the journey, the hurt, the rejection, the nights spent wondering if I'd made a mistake leaving. But it also reminded me of resilience, courage, and the quiet power of independence. Sitting in the corner chair, I touched Grandma's note, now slightly worn, the ink smudged from years of handling. I whispered softly, almost to myself, "You were right. I am enough." And now they see it too, but on my terms. A gentle smile curved my lips as I realized the final truth. Success, independence, and self-respect were never about proving anyone wrong. They were about proving myself right. Later, I stood by the window, looking out over the city that had once felt intimidating, now welcoming. The skyline shimmered, lights reflecting the journey from uncertainty to triumph. I thought about how far I had come, the distance traveled from the 17-year-old girl clutching a rent bill in a kitchen filled with dismissal. I had left without a word once, but now my voice was strong, my presence undeniable. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the city, a sound that once felt overwhelming but now felt like affirmation. I breathed deeply, the scent of eucalyptus and polished wood grounding me. I had given them a chance, not for my validation, but for theirs, and in doing so, I had fully claimed myself. And as I turned back to my desk, ready to continue creating, I said softly, almost as a final whisper to anyone who doubted me, I left, I built, I returned. Not to beg, not to explain, but to show that a woman who knows her worth cannot be ignored.